There is a lie we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. The lie that we are the masters of this world. We look at our fences, at our land deeds, at our concrete houses, and we believe we are in control. We believe the ground beneath our feet is solid and inanimate, just dirt and stone waiting to be shaped by our will. But anyone who has lived on the edge of the unknown knows the truth. The truth is that we are merely tenants. Noisy and temporary tenants living on someone else's roof. And sometimes, the landlord comes up to check on the noise. I learned this the hard way. Not through books or conspiracy theories, but through silence. That specific kind of silence that falls over the forest when something that should not be there begins to move. Most people are afraid of noise in the dark, of the snapping twig, of the distant scream. But true terror makes no sound. True terror is when nature itself, the crickets, the birds, the wind, everything goes quiet at once, in a forced and terrifying reverence. Because they know what is passing through. And they know it is not human. What I am about to report is not a ghost story. Ghosts are echoes of the past. Ghosts are memories that refuse to die. What lives in that forest, what lives beneath that soil, was never human. It is an ancient intelligence, cold, and calculating, that was here long before us, and will remain here long after we are gone. This is the story of when I discovered that the earth is hollow, and that it has eyes. After the event with the vortex, that day when reality seemed to fold upon itself, something inside me changed fundamentally. It was as if a lens had been removed from my eyes. I could no longer look at the forest and see only trees and brush. I looked and saw a facade. A stage set up to hide something operating behind the scenes. The innocence of childhood had been ripped from me, replaced by a constant vigilance, a paranoia that settled in my bones like a low fever. The days dragged on, but it was the nights that became my torment. Sleep became something fragile, broken by any creak in the wood of the house. I began to realize that the silence of the woods was not empty. It was a filled silence, dense. It was like being in a dark room knowing there is another person standing in the corner, holding their breath, just watching you, waiting for you to move. I started waking up systematically at 3 in the morning. Not because of nightmares, but because of a physical sensation of pressure in the air. I would lie in bed, eyes wide open in the darkness, listening to the blood pounding in my ears. And then, it would begin. Footsteps. Not the quick steps of an animal running, but slow, deliberate, heavy steps. Steps of something walking on 2 legs, circling the house. The old wood of the porch groaned, boards I knew by heart, boards that only creaked under the weight of a grown man. I heard the sound shift, from the front to the back, stopping near my window. The sound of breathing, or perhaps it was just the wind, but it sounded wet, too close. I wanted to get up, wanted to turn on the light and scream, but fear paralyzed me. A primal fear, reptilian, telling me to stay motionless, to pretend I did not exist. Because if I looked, if I saw what was out there, there would be no turning back. It was my grandmother who broke the ice. She was a woman of the earth, hardened by work and life, but she had a sensitivity that most people have lost. One afternoon, while we watched the tree line that seemed to advance upon the yard, she said something that chilled me. She said that this forest had always been different. That it had a weight. A gravity of its own. She told me about her father, my great-grandfather, a man who had tamed this land with axe and scythe. A man who feared neither jaguar nor snake, but who had a sacred respect for what happened after the sun went down. She said he knew. He knew the forest had an owner. And that we were merely tolerated there. That night, the old man called me. Sitting near the wood stove, with the firelight dancing on his wrinkled face, he looked like a keeper of ancient secrets. His blue eyes, intense and clear, fixed on me with a seriousness I had never seen. "You have been hearing things, haven't you?" he asked, his voice rough like gravel. I just nodded, unable to speak, relieved and terrified not to be the only one. Those sounds of clearing the brush, he continued, the sound of metal hitting wood, the sound of the scythe cutting the grass, that is not living people. And when it is people, they are people who died a long time ago. He began to tell me about the blood history of that land. About how, in the old days, men killed each other over a meter of fence. Over a poorly drawn boundary. He spoke of the human obsession with ownership, a disease so deep it survived death itself. He told me that, on moonless nights, he could still hear the old neighbors, men he saw buried, working in the woods. The rhythmic, hissing sound, of the invisible scythe cutting the bush. Swish. 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 Souls trapped in an eternal loop of labor and greed, guarding borders that no longer existed. I have seen souls that do not accept losing a fence, he said. They die, the body rots, but the will to possess the land remains. They stay there, cutting the bush, patrolling, driving out intruders, until the end of time. That made sense to me. It explained the sounds of work I heard coming from the darkness. It explained the feeling of being watched by something territorial. But, deep down, I knew there was more. The ghosts of greedy farmers were just the surface layer. They were just the dust on top. What I felt, what made the air heavy and electric, was something much older than dead farmers. It was something that was there before the first human set foot in that region. I began to investigate the terrain with different eyes. Eyes looking for evidence of a crime, or a lost civilization. Next to the old ceramic factory, there was a patch of land that always seemed sterile to me, strange. Nothing grew well there. And that was where I started finding the signs. Arrowheads. Dozens of them. Made of quartz, of flint. Stones worked with surgical precision. They sprouted from the ground after the rain, as if the earth was spitting out memories of an ancient war. I held one of those points in my hand, feeling the cold of the stone, and realized that this was not just an artifact. It was a warning. Why so many weapons in one place? Why so many arrows left behind? Was it a hunting ground? Or was it a battlefield? And if it was a battle, who were they fighting against? The local legends did not speak of wars between tribes there. They spoke of lights that came down from the sky, and of people who came out of the caves. Near there, hidden by dense and thorny vegetation, there was a waterfall. A place of somber beauty, where sunlight rarely touched the ground. There were ruins of an ancient water mill, rotting wood covered in moss, stones that seemed to have been placed by giant hands. The air in that hollow was different. It was colder, damper, and had a metallic smell, like ozone or sulfur. But the most disturbing thing was the ground. In certain spots around the waterfall, when I stepped, the sound was not of compact earth. It was a hollow sound. A dull thud. Thump. Thump. As if there was a cavity just beneath the roots. As if I were walking on the roof of a large empty room. My grandmother always avoided that place. She said there were things buried there. Ancient things. From the first ones who lived around here. But she never specified who the first ones were. Now I understand. The hollow ground, the arrowheads, the instinctive fear of the animals. Everything pointed downwards. We look to the sky searching for answers, searching for life, but perhaps we have spent millennia ignoring what is beneath our boots. The theory of the hollow earth, of intraterrestrial civilizations, has always been treated as madness, but there, in that forest, it seemed the only logical explanation. And then, came the confirmation. The visual proof that turned my suspicions into absolute certainty. It did not come from the ground, but from the connection between the sky and the earth. It happened on a Tuesday night, an ordinary night, no storm, no wind. I was on the second floor of our house, which was built on high pillars, giving me a privileged view of the neighboring field. A vast field, covered in low, dark vegetation, the exact spot where the ancient indigenous village was said to have existed. It was exactly 11 o'clock at night when they appeared. 2 spheres. 2 balls of light, not fire, but cold light, blue-white, like incandescent liquid mercury. They emerged from the middle of the woods, making no sound, absolutely no noise. They floated about 2 meters off the ground, gliding over the tall grass without disturbing it. My brain tried to find a rational explanation. A drone. A balloon. Car headlights. But nothing fit. They moved with impossible fluidity. They stopped instantly, turned at sharp angles without slowing down, defying inertia. And the scariest part, they moved in sync. As if connected by a hive mind. One went left, the other followed milliseconds later, keeping perfect formation. They were not just wandering. They were patrolling. They were doing a systematic sweep of the terrain, back and forth, as if looking for something, or protecting something. The light they emitted did not illuminate the environment like a flashlight, it was a contained light, that seemed to stay inside the sphere. They pulsed gently, as if breathing, or communicating. I stood paralyzed at the window, feeling a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. That was technology. But it was not ours. It was organic and mechanical at the same time. They were probes. Sentinels. Guardians. I called my great-grandfather, expecting him to be shocked, expecting him to grab the shotgun or call the police. But his reaction was what sealed the truth for me. He walked to the window, lit a straw cigarette with steady hands, and looked at the lights dancing in the field. He did not blink. He showed no surprise. He just exhaled the smoke slowly and said, with a voice tired of carrying secrets too heavy. "They still walk there," he murmured. He did not say ghosts. He did not say souls. He said they. And in that pronoun, in that simple they, there was an acknowledgement of another species. Of another civilization. He knew. The ancients knew. The indigenous people knew. Those lights were not visitors. They were residents. They were the owners of the house doing the night rounds. I watched the spheres for nearly 20 minutes. They crossed the field until they got close to the waterfall area, that area of the hollow ground. And then, they simply vanished. They did not fly into the sky. They did not fade out. They seemed to have entered the earth, or crossed an invisible veil, returning to the place they came from. That night, I did not sleep. I lay listening to the sounds of the house, and every creak felt like a threat. I realized that my great-grandfather's story about the ghosts with scythes and the story of the lights were the same story. Dead humans remained attached to the surface, fighting for crumbs of land. But below them, below the roots and the bones, there was something much bigger. Something that controlled those plasma spheres. Something that used the forest as camouflage. The arrowheads I found, maybe they were not weapons of war between tribes, maybe they were weapons used to defend against them. To defend against what came out of the caves at night. The forest was not a place of peace, it was a demilitarized zone. A thin border between our surface world and the deep world of the intraterrestrials. I began to understand why the animals were afraid of that place. Why the cattle refused to graze near the waterfall. Animals feel the vibration. They feel the electromagnetic hum coming from below. We, humans, have lost that ability, or were conditioned to ignore it. We call it haunting, we call it folklore, because the truth is too terrifying to be accepted. The truth is that we are never alone in the forest. Every step we take is monitored. Every word we speak is heard. The voices of the forest are not hallucinations. They are leaks. They are radio frequencies from a neighboring civilization crossing with ours. The snaps, the footsteps on the porch, the lights in the field, are just the tip of the iceberg. They are down there, in cities of stone and crystal, in caves that do not appear on maps. And sometimes, when the night is dark enough, and the silence is deep enough, they come up. Not to attack us, but to remind us. To remind us that our fences are irrelevant. That our land deeds are worthless. Because the ground we walk on is their roof. Since that night, I have never looked at the ground the same way. When I walk through the woods now, I tread lightly. Not to avoid making noise, but out of respect. And out of fear. Because I know that, just beneath the sole of my boot, on the other side of a few meters of dirt and rock, something might be walking upside down, mirroring my steps, listening to my heartbeat. The forest remembers. The forest keeps. And what it keeps is not dead. It is just waiting, waiting for the moment when we forget to be afraid, to rise again. If you hear the sound of a scythe at night, or see lights that should not be there, do not run. It is no use running. They already know where you are. Just close your eyes, and hope that they are just passing through, returning home, to the world that exists inside ours.
Thank you.